It is Tuesday, October 11th. It is 7:04 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Number of council members here. We have myself, we have Sean O'Rourke, we have Donald Wales, and we have Jason Maurer. Virtual, we have Kevin Reed, Jessica Tuska, and Terry Rooney. Vice Chair Lapellis will not be here tonight, and I do not see Councilmember Martin right now. Councilmember Martin is out for the time being. Consent calendar, are there any objections to pass the consent calendar as presented? Hearing none, I'm going to pass the consent calendar as presented. I ask that communication items A through K be incorporated into the minutes of our meeting. Public participation, is there any member of the public that will participate at this time? Come forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Kirsch, 35 Applegate Lane. For the record, I'm a member of the Board of Finance. However, my comments tonight are solely my own. They do not represent the board nor any other member. I'd like to address the contract for the VHB for the road study. I support the contract. I do have some comments that I would like to make. On the client authorization, item number 2, it identifies that they will identify the minor changes to terminal names and the segments. I would like to see us get a list of those changes year to year when we look at, well, at least I do, at what's changed, having to compare all those things. I understand why sometimes you split roads, sometimes you put sections back together. It would be nice to have a list. The other thing I don't see is exactly how they carry out their study and what tools. Manual, is it an automated vehicle, the camera, those systems are out there. So I'm sort of maybe surprised that that was not there. On number 4, it says develop a 3-year pavement plan in my question is, why are we doing a 3-year plan if we evaluate our roads every 4 years? To me, I think you would want to have those in sync, or maybe I'm missing something. The other things I would like to ensure that we get is a full detail spreadsheet of all of the data that they collect. We've been able to get it from them after the fact, and I think it should be turned over to us when they provide the reports. The other thing that I think would be useful would be an actual comparison between the PCIs for those roads, for all the roads from 2018 to the study we're about to do, so that we can see per road exactly how that is declining, by how much it's declining in PCI, and pavement condition index value, and as a percent. That will allow us to start looking at which roads are declining faster than others. Maybe there's reasons for it, and maybe those would be roads that we would add to the plan. The other thing that's not in here anywhere, as it was not in the prior report, is anything about the storm drains. And I think that a completed report should indicate which roads have been studied, which have been found to be deficient for the storm drains, which we've repaired, and what the cost will be for those roads that will be identified in this plan to be repaired over the next 3 years. We learned during the budget process that we're spending about 1/3 of our money when they estimate cost for storm drains, and I think that's a significant number. If that can be included in the overall report, I think that would be useful for the town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone here in person that would like to participate? Then I'll go online. Is there anyone here through electronic means, either by telephone, tablet, or computer, that would like to participate at this time? Please remember to unmute yourself. Hearing none, I'm going to close public participation. We have one appointment this evening. Mr. Maurer.
Thank you. I move to appoint Chrissy Fencer Martinez of 79 Old Castle Drive to the Board of Education with a term ending November 27th, 2023. This appointment fills the vacancy created by the resignation of Nicholas Kapoor.
All right, we have a motion to appoint Chrissy Fencer Martinez to the Board of Education with a term ending November 27th, 2023. Is there a second?
Second.
I got Jess there. Mr. Maurer.
Thank you. Chrissy Fencer Martinez holds a bachelor's and master's degree in special education from Southern Connecticut State University. She's also a Connecticut certified school administrator. Chrissy has worked as a special education teacher, supervisor, and director of special education in Connecticut for more than 25 years. Her current role is as senior director of school partnerships for Aspire Living and Learning, Inc., where she oversees the consultation to school districts across the state of Connecticut and New Hampshire. Aspire is a nonprofit human services agency that serves youth and adults with disabilities across 5 states. Chrissy is also an adjunct professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of St. Joseph in West Hartford. She has recently completed a 2-year term as a secretary for the Monroe Special Education PTA, SEPTA, and was on the board of directors for the Connecticut Reading League, formerly the Dyslexia Society of Connecticut, for several years. I will also add that Chrissy is a lifelong resident of Monroe, having gone through the Monroe school systems, has family involved in education, and has children in the school systems as well. So she has direct contact, connection to the school and to the school system. Outside of that, like I said, this fills the resignation of Nicholas Kapoor. She was moved on through LNA, and in the standard questions that were asked of her, indicated that she would recuse herself from any conflict of interest and has no problem voting in regards to what's in the best interest of the town, of the children of the school, even if that goes against her personal opinion on those matters.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Any other discussion? What I would say is Mr. Reed and I were also in LNA, and I did ask a lot of questions, both personal and professional. What I found was that on the professional side of things, as Mr. Maurer said, the nominee works for a provider of special education services. That provider is Aspire Living and Learning Incorporated. Aspire is a vendor with the Board of Education. Since 2013, the Board of Education has paid Aspire nearly $3.4 million. And in 2022 alone, they paid just over $123,000 this calendar year. I did have an opportunity to ask the nominee about this, and she did say that she would recuse herself from any warrant that would not be signed by the Board of Education. She also responded to a question by Councilmember Maurer about whether or not she would recuse herself from the entire budget vote. She said no, even though that line item would be there. I don't find that response wrong in any way. She was also asked about personal conflict. Mr. Martinez, the nominee's husband, was a former member of the Board of Education who was passed by Town Council in September of 2015. Mr. Martinez is a member of the Administrators Collective Bargaining Unit for Norwalk Public Schools. The school district here in Monroe and the Board of Education negotiated with a sister bargaining unit, the Administrators Union. I asked the nominee about whether or not she would recuse herself from voting on the contract for the Administrators Union. To that question, she said no, she did not believe she had to because it's her husband that works there. What I would say is that, whether there is a financial conflict of interest or not. If there is or is not, that is not for us really to decide. I can only put myself in the position of a taxpayer in Monroe. And, as a person that just looks upon that and those two factors, one, she works for a vendor that's, been paid for good services provided by the school district, millions of dollars. And this year alone, over $123,000 in services, along with the fact that part of her household income is related to a collective bargaining unit employee that has a sister organization that Monroe Public Schools negotiate with. I believe that this could cast a little bit of a shadow over taxpayer confidence in how funds are expended at that level. There were other matters covered in LNA that, I don't think really have a bearing on our decision tonight. Rather have a bearing, during election season, and whether or not the nominee has to answer those at some point, that's for the voters to decide. But for me, I will be voting no based upon those conflicts that I see. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
I'm just going to go
Yep.
around first. Any other discussion?
Further discussion.
Okay, Jason.
I will just also add that Chrissy was asked specifically if there were any conflict of interest that she did perceive when it came to the administrator's contract, whether she would recuse herself. Her answer to that question was yes. But her answer to the initial question was that she doesn't foresee there being any conflict of interest, as it's no different than a teacher serving on a board of education in a different district, administrator serving on a board of education in a different district, and our board of education specifically has rules that only preclude Monroe employees from serving on it. That it actually if that were to be a conflict of interest, then the town charter, the town rules would state as much. They actually only specifically include Monroe employees from serving on the Board of Education. So that there was no conflict of interest that she could foresee, but if there were a conflict of interest, she would then recuse herself from those matters. Also, when it comes to the financial interests, one other item that was discussed is that Ms. Fensler Martinez's position specifically deals with the being a liaison to the school, and that this company she works for also has private schools. And while she doesn't know the exact number because she's not involved in those private schools, chances are a large amount of the budgetary constraints over the years from Monroe deal with students who are attending those private schools, not necessarily directly involved with her employment. And she stated that despite that, anything to do with her employment, she would recuse herself from, even if it's with those private schools that she has nothing to do with. As such, I think she answered affirmatively that she could avoid the conflict of interest that might be presented. And this council's job is simply to basically determine her qualification, as well as whether or not there is any ethical conflict. And I believe, based off of her answers and off of her experience, we can say there's not. So I will be voting yes.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. O'Rourke.
with regards to this appointment, we're talking about a budgetary arm of the town that I believe borders on 65% of our budget. If I have the numbers correct, I think we were in excess of $63 million of a $98 million budget last cycle. This particular situation is unique because of the top weighted end of the amount of the budget that is occupied by the Board of Ed. This is not, I don't want to say simple a board or commission of a lesser magnitude, at least budgetary. But I think there needs to be some consideration with regards to the weight of the amount of budgetary money that's involved here. It's an extremely high weighted average with regards to the total budget. So that does put a little bit more emphasis on potential, I hate to use the word conflicts of interest, but the points that you had raised regarding the applicant's present employer and the amount of funds that have been dispersed for that specific company. And, again, I'm going back and forth here on this. If it had been a much lesser budgetary emphasis on the board, this recusing on specific items and such.
Recusal on all items.
Excuse me.
With
Please,
regards to
Jason, one at a time, please.
The recusing on specific items on the budget would be a little bit more understandable. I'm just fighting my way through this as I'm talking. I'm kind of going through this back and forth in my head. Yeah, I mean, 65% of the budget, with this, with the background that we're talking here, that does present an issue. That's what I have for the moment. Anyone else want to add?
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Just one moment.
Yep.
I think Jessica unmuted herself.
Yes.
Okay,
May I
go
speak?
ahead. Go ahead.
I think we need to be realistic on the amount of authority that Democrats have on the Board of Education, given that there's only 3 seats total. I've sat on the Board of Ed during these budget negotiations. There's really no room to push someone's job, push the budget in a specific direction, especially given the amount of power the Democrats have. One of the things I love most about Monroe is, though I'm a Democrat, I get along well with everyone. And I think we need to consider that most of us are very bipartisan. We're very kind to each other. And I think this is the decision that the Democrats made. And I think we should consider that, just being bipartisan and understanding the amount of authority she will realistically have over budget line items. It's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair? Yeah.
I got you. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
As I stated, really this is dealing with one line item, possibly a few, which when talking about the overarching, yes, while the Board of Ed budget is great, this is only a very small portion annually of that Board of Ed budget. And the candidate has stated that she would recuse herself from any decision with regards to any items with respect to her employment. As such, I think that conflict completely disintegrates.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Maurer. There's no other discussion. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of appointing Chrissy Fensor Martinez to the Board of Education with term ending November 27th, 2023, please say aye.
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 Okay, 3. So that was Kevin. Sorry, people are at virtual. Okay, and all those against, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Rooney? Mr. Rooney has not voted. Motion fails 3-3. Oh, Mr. Rooney? Go ahead.
Formicello?
Go ahead. Nay, okay. Motion fails 4-3. 3-4, excuse me. Moving on to action items. Town Council Committee on Finance, Education, Health and Public Safety Matters. Madam Vice Chair is not here this evening. They have not met since our last meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask for a brief recess.
We will recess until 7:30 p.m.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's 7:30. We are back on the record after our recess. Our last item was,
Chair, before we move on, may I have a moment?
no, Mr. Mauer.
Mr. Chair, I would like to be able to make a comment on the record as to our vote.
No, Mr. Mauer.
It's been the practice of our council to allow for this.
Mr. Mauer, you are not recognized. You are out of order.
It will be a very brief statement, Mr. Chair. I ask.
Mr. Mauer, you are out of order. The discussion was held on that matter.
All right, so Mr. Chair, I'm just to understand the point of clarification. Your ruling is that despite the long precedent of this council to allow for a comment by a member on a vote, that you will not be allowing a duly elected member of the town council to make a statement on the record on that vote.
The vote has been held. Discussion was held. You had numerous opportunities to speak during that discussion period, of which you took, which was as your right. There's no other discussion on this matter.
So point of clarification, can you answer my last question?
There is no other discussion on that item this evening.
So it is your ruling that despite that, so your answer is in the affirmative.
My answer is there is no discussion on this topic anymore. Moving on. Item B, Town Council Committee on Planning, Zoning, Public Works, and Park and Recreation Matters. Mr. Rooney.
We have not met since last council, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Town Council Committee on Legislative and Administrative Matters.
I have a comment on our meeting for legislative and administrative matters.
One moment, Mr. Mauer, Mr. Reed.
Okay, yeah, we did meet tonight. There were 4 items of new business plus the interview of Ms. Fensor Martinez. The other 4 items of new business were the PKF O'Connor Davies Adult Engagement Letter, VHB Pavement Management Contract, Danbury Music Center Contract for use of Marian Anderson, Recital Hall, there's a mouthful, and Memorandum of Understanding Sharing Agreement for Police Radio Systems, all reached consensus to come to council.
Mr. Reed, Mr. Mauer.
Thank you, Mr. Formicella. On the interview of Ms. Martinez, there were a number of questions asked. It concerns me that some of those questions dealt with her husband's job as an administrator, as well as her history with the her history and her job. It seems to me that those would be qualifications to a member of the Board of Education, and basically by those questions, we are attempting to preclude actual educators from serving on the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. Strategic Planning Committee.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
If I could just.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, the question with regards to the current construct of the Board of Education, Dr. Vagalavano, is he actively engaged in the education system, or is he retired?
I can only guess. I believe Dr. Vagalavano is still active.
Okay. And then Mr. Stevens is retired Monroe teacher.
That is my understanding.
Okay. So two, one active, one retired, seated on the board at the moment.
That is my understanding.
So there is representation on the Board of Education by the teachers, former or active.
Yes, Mr. O'Rourke.
Okay. Just want to clarify that in my head.
Mr. Formicella, one clarification of my own.
Briefly, if you want.
Thank you. So then it would seem that a person's job in another district as part of a collective bargaining unit would not be a conflict of interest if that already exists on our Board of Education. Just something I wanted to clarify in my head.
I don't believe Mr. Vagliavello nor Mr. Stevens was appointed to fill a vacancy, and they have had.
And yet there has been no ethics violation for their conflicts of interest. What a surprise.
Moving on. There's been no strategic planning meeting since our last town council meeting. We will have a meeting in October or early November. EMS committee, Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did meet tonight. The project is going very well. The concern we have at this point is getting the power connected by EverSource. Everything is ready to go. We had a heck of a time checking it for a meter socket. There wasn't one available in the nation, so it became a problem to connect the building, but we did locate one and we're up and running. EverSource is waiting for a payment from the town, which I got confirmation from Ron Bonofsky that will be being paid. If not today, we paid tomorrow. So in a short amount of time, we should be getting that building powered up, be able to move the EMS people out of their temporary trailer into their permanent home and get the trailer out of there and get paid. So that's about where we are at this point. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Roney. Open Space Preservation and Acquisition Committee, Mr. O'Rourke.
We have not met since our last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. First Selectman, your update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just two categories of updates today. First, I just want to thank our Economic Development Commission and our Director of Economic and Community Development for the town for once again planning a restaurant week, which will be back for 2022. They have finalized plans. It is scheduled for October 17th through the 23rd. I have a list of currently the 24 current restaurants that have confirmed their participation. The town will be promoting those restaurants and their specials that they are offering. The list, as well as those specials, are available. A link on the town's website and on the EDC social media pages that brings you to those restaurants and their specials. So thanks to the EDC for their ongoing work in that regard, and looking forward to another great restaurant week. And the second category is just there's a few updates on specific road work that will impact some of the more heavily traveled roads in our town. One is on Purdy Hill Road. Aquarian advised us very recently that they would be working to extend a water main, which will impact an area between Monroe Turnpike and Green Lawn Road. That work is scheduled to begin this week. They've actually done preliminary work in that regard already, and that is expected to go on for approximately 3 weeks. The Pepper Street project, everyone is aware of, that is ongoing. A lot of progress. The first course of payment was completed in between the Commerce and Cambridge Drive areas. New drainage work is ongoing. Preparations were completed for the new traffic signal, but the project team is waiting on the State Department of Transportation on the final schedule for installation because it does need to be coordinated with them. And construction for the relocation of the multi-use trail has begun in earnest as well, and all that work will be continuing in the upcoming weeks. Last but not least, Shelton Road or Route 110, the state will be milling and paving a section from the Shelton Town line to Moose Hill Road. That is scheduled to start the week of October 19th to the 21st for milling, and paving from October 31st to November 4th. So in all those cases, there'll be some delays due to alternating one-lane traffic. Of course, the schedules are subject to change due to weather, et cetera. So other than that, that is my update for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. First Selectman. That takes care of action items. We have no matters of unfinished business this evening. We have 4 matters of new business. Item A, acceptance of the following donations that individually exceed $1,500. Number 1, $3,766.90 from John Von Kampfer Food Pantry. Number 2, $2,000 from the Monroe First Foundation for the Senior Center. Is there a motion to accept these donations?
So moved.
Motion by Donaldin Wales. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mauer. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you. Just as always, my thanks on behalf of the town and community for these generous donations. They will obviously be put to good use. Full disclosure, the Monroe First Foundation is a charitable foundation that I run with others, and the funds are raised primarily through the First Selectman's Golf Outing, and we're happy to contribute to the senior center's programming fund in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg and your foundation for that generous donation. And thank you, John Van Camp's donation to the Monroe Food Pantry. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting those two donations, please say aye.
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 All those against, please say nay. Hearing no nays, this passes 7-0. Item B, Resolution 22-131. I move that the Town Council adopt Resolution 22-131, resolve that Kenneth M. Kellogg, First Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the pavement management contract and any associated documents by and between Benassi Engine Rustlin, Inc., VHB, for pavement management services. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Donaldin Wales. Mr. Kellogg, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you all are aware, since 2010, we've been conducting a pavement management study every 4 years to best evaluate how our road condition has changed over time, evaluate our approach, and update the town's program to prioritize road improvements. The study utilizes the standard pavement condition index, or PCI methodology, which has worked well for the town in the past. As we discussed during the budget process, we are now is the time to revise our plan and update all that information. Our Public Works Director, Chris Nowacki, who's here tonight, has researched it and has recommended that we continue to utilize VHB as they are cost effective and it will provide consistency in the year-to-year evaluation. It has been reviewed by the town attorney and you have his letter of opinion, and we ask that you move this forward so we can continue with our pavement management efforts.
Thank you, Mr. First Selectman. Any other discussion? Mr. O'Rourke.
Chris, I'm not even sure I could do this, and please slap me on the knuckles if I can't. With regards to the points that were raised in public participation, how difficult or simple would some of those suggestions be to implement?
With respect to the questions, Chris Nowacki, Public Works Director. The list of the changes, I think, is something that we can, should they exist, happen. Really, it depends on the settings that they look at relative to the overall length of the road. So PCI is of one number for a portion of a length of road. If things change, I'm sure we can gather up that information and put it in a more defined report. The data is evaluated. It speaks to it actually in number 2, relevant to the engineer performing the evaluation will make treatment recommendations based on the conditions of the road. We have previously discussed with VHB the newer technology, which is a street scan. There's a lot of holes in that because of the evaluation. We don't find that to be the prudent avenue at this point. We'd rather have boots on the ground evaluation of the roadway segments. So that is how that is going to be done. Should technology advance and the outcomes be a little bit more solid, I think maybe we could look at that in the future. Spreadsheets will be put together. We will have those as listed in here. And then specifically the 3-year versus a 4-year or 2-year. The previous time we had it done in 2018, we actually provided a 2-year analysis just from a budgeting perspective moving forward. We're looking at a 3-year, again, from a budgeting perspective. One of the components of this obviously is the drainage. It has actually been discussed here, I believe, on numerous occasions. We're not looking at the drainage from an engineering standpoint. We do that in-house. The exorbitant cost far outweighs the actual task. So we perform that in-house. And the reason really for a 3rd year not being lined up with a 4-year evaluation gives us the ability to have some flexibility. We analyze the drainage ourselves. Sometimes that is really the leading factor as to why we address a road and move things around. So as we have a 3-year plan, we have the ability to adjust with that. And as we approach approach that fourth year, as we are now, we're engaging with, we would technically be engaging the contractor again to run another analysis of our progress and the road conditions. So I believe that answers everything. Anybody has any other questions?
Does it answer?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I broke the rule. The invisible fence collar just went off.
No, we're all
Sorry.
any other discussion?
My apologies.
Any other discussion on the adoption of resolution 22-131? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of adopting resolution 22-131, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. Hearing no nays, this passes 7-0. All right, item C, resolution 22-132. I move that the town council adopt resolution 22-132. Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, first selectman of the town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the town of Monroe the contract for use of Marion Anderson Recital Hall and any associated documents by and between Danbury Music Center for annual recital to celebrate WMNR's 40th anniversary. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mauer. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So once again, our general manager of WMNR, Kurt Anderson, is planning a celebratory event in honor of their 40th anniversary. The one before us this evening is a recital being conducted by one of WMNR's volunteer broadcasters, which will be free to the public, and they are seeking to do that at this venue, which Danbury Music Center, and they have provided their standard agreement relative to use of that facility. It's been reviewed by the town attorney. You have his letter of opinion. I ask that you move this forward so they can continue to plan their celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of adopting resolution 22-132, please say aye.
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 All those against, please say nay. Hearing no nays, this passes 7-0. Item D, resolution 22-133. I move that the town council adopt resolution 22-133. Resolved that Keith White, police chief of the town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the town of Monroe the memorandum of understanding, sharing agreement for police radio systems and any associated documents by and between the Trumbull Police Department for the sharing of radio systems. Is there a second?
Second.
By Donald Wales. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this agreement is simply to allow both the Monroe Police Department and the Trumbull Police Department to program frequencies into our respective radio systems that would allow officers from both departments to be able to transmit and communicate between and among both departments in those circumstances where it may become necessary. It is certainly not an uncommon practice, but it is appropriate that it be memorialized in a written agreement. Given the nature of those radio communication systems. Both chiefs have expressed a desire to do this, as Trumbull and Monroe certainly, being neighbors frequently would assist each other in mutual aid or certain communications as relates to things that may be happening in adjoining towns. We ask that you move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any other discussion on resolution 22-133? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting resolution 22-133, please say aye.
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 All those against, please say nay. Hearing no nays, this passes 7-0. We have no other items of new business. We have no unfinished items of unfinished business or new business. So there is no second public participation this evening. I'm adjourning this meeting at 7:49 p.m. Thank you, everyone.